getting better. Like, nothing works, what gives? How long is this going to take? How do I know I'm doing it right? What's my starting tempo? If you're starting your journey as a beginning double bass drummer doing the ankle technique, these are all probably questions you've asked before. And I'll take you on my journey from beginning double bass drum player to 4 months in, showing you problems I've encountered on the way and how to fix them. Enjoy. So when I was looking around on the internet for videos and information about the ankle technique, all I seemed to find was you'd get someone who's like years and years of practice and they're like 300 BPM and this is where you get to, this is the end result. But what I couldn't find was anything to do with how do you get there, what's the journey, what's it like beginning, how do you know you're doing it right? And that's where I am now as a player, actually. So my practice started about 3 months ago for the ankle technique specifically. Now my background is I'm a single bass drum player, or was a single bass drum player. I've been playing for about 25 years, so pretty late starting double bass drum. But yeah, I started doing the full leg technique and the ankle technique around the same kind of time. So I do 5 minutes per leg, just one at a time, and then as many minutes as I can do together. So that normally starts with my left leg, and then I move on to my right leg, and then I try and get them to move together. So this is an actual practice session, warts and all. I'm starting with my left foot. Okay, so this is how it normally starts. So I'm trying to get lined up with the metronome, the foot isn't quite lined up, and it starts to twitch, and then it starts and stops. So it's kind of getting there now, but it's still not quite lined up. So we'll just scrub on a little bit. And it starts to lock into the metronome finally. So this first bit, with my left foot at least, takes about 30 seconds to a minute. Depends on the day. Sometimes it locks in pretty much immediately. Other days it just takes a little longer. But once it's locked in, I generally don't have to think about it. It can just keep going. So I'll pick my phone up and just start scrolling. Often it's actually the best thing to do as well, because it takes your mind off in it. You're not concentrating directly on what you're doing. You're just letting it go automatically. So you could watch this for 5 minutes, but I think I'm going to cut it here because nobody wants to do that. Cool, so we're moving over to my right foot now. Now my right foot, you can see here, has a bit of trouble starting, as with the left foot. Tends to race ahead a little bit. Now the reason for that is my right foot seems to have like a natural tempo which is faster than the left. So actually in this particular instance it takes me a good time before it actually starts to lock in. And it really depends on the day as well. On this particular example, it was not a good practice, so it actually took me probably 4 minutes into the practice before I actually started to lock in with the metronome. It's just the way it goes sometimes. It's what I want to show you guys. Warts and all, as I mentioned at the start. So we're going to scrub along again to the end, and you should start to see it hopefully line up with the metronome. And the aim at the end as well is to hit it bang on the last metronome beat. So the next step you want to get to is the alternating right left, or left right if you're a left-footed player. Now this is the hardest thing. So when I first started, I could maintain it for maybe a couple of seconds, and then the feet would kind of like phase out again and start to go in unison. It was almost like one foot was going at a slightly different tempo to the other one, and they'd phase in and out, so they'd be together, and then they'd be alternate for a few seconds, and then they'd be together again. Obviously you want to try and avoid that, but how do you do that? Well, it really is just keep practicing. Now I found that the best way to do it for me was to not concentrate when I start to do the alternating feet. I would just let them naturally try and find the one would play off against the other one. And I actually did this by when I practiced, I started looking at my phone. I started trying to distract myself as much as possible so that I wasn't concentrating on my feet. And what I found was I could have stretches of maybe 30 seconds where they were alternating. And as soon as I started concentrating back on those feet again, they'd start to skip and go together. So I found really actually once my feet have locked in after that first 10 minutes of practice on the individual feet, when you're doing your alternates, distract yourself, look on the internet, look at videos on YouTube, look at text, whatever you can do to distract yourself. If you feel those locking in and going alternate, then that's what you want. So on to the third and last phase of the practice, which is 2 feet together. So starting off actually with my left foot here, because I spent 5 minutes with my right foot on its own, just making sure that the left foot can get to the right tempo. And almost immediately I'm skipping, I'm shuffling, and the feet are going phasing between shuffling and unison. So not a great start, but this is usually the way it starts. I don't usually get the roll going, at least for the first minute or so. Feet are trying to find their way. But it gets better every practice. Every single practice it gets a little easier. Some days actually I'll go backwards though. So I might have a great practice one day, and then the next day it's almost like I haven't learned anything. That's just the way it goes. It is a slow process. It's a really slow process, like probably much slower than anything I've learned on the drums before. But I know that by continuing to do it, I'll make gradual progress over time. So this is where it finally starts to lock in. Now it's not perfect by any means. I'm not particularly happy with the beta swing height. That's something I'm going to work on in the future. Also the beta swing length. But I am actually starting to get it where they're sort of connecting together now. So my left foot is almost following my right foot. I'm able to maintain this for probably maybe 30 seconds to a minute. As I say, it's not perfect by any means, but it's at least locking in. Not perfectly though, so it's still not absolutely bang on the metronome, but work for future. At the moment, I just want to get it so that I can at least start this kind of level right from the beginning, so that's my next aim. Keep this practice up until I'm able to start and stop at will, left foot following the right foot. As before, this carries on probably for about another 5 minutes or so. So I'm going to cut it here and then switch to the next section. So how do you know you're doing it right? It's a big question, isn't it? I mean, people could tell you how to do it, but how do you internally know that you're actually doing the process right? So how do you know you're doing the ankle technique correctly? Well, I've been doing it for years without even realising, so I'm quite a fidgety person. When I'm sitting down, my leg's always bouncing. It's kind of like this nervous twitch where you're kind of like bouncing your heel like that. That's the technique. That's actually what you're trying to do. But the important thing is there should be no tension in the leg. So you're just literally trying to raise your heel off the ground and let it drop again by using the calf muscle, the top of the leg with the thigh muscles, and then the hamstrings should not be engaged at all. So you're literally just bouncing your foot like that. You should be able to do this for 20 minutes, half an hour at a time with no real sort of exertion. This should be an easy process. The difference between this and the flat foot technique is the flat foot technique uses a lot more energy. You'll tire sooner. So this is the movement anyway. Just bouncing your heel like that. And then you transfer this across to the pedal and do the same. How often to practice and how long to practice for? Well, if you follow Martin on Drum Technique Academy, he tells you 3 days a week. For me, I've got a bit more time on my hands, so I actually practice a bit more than that. So it's normally 5 days a week is what I get in. Now, when you're doing the ankle technique, you can actually do more practice than you can with a full leg technique, because the ankle technique, if you do it properly, requires very little muscle movement. So you don't tire yourself out at all. What's the right tempo to start with? Well, I made a mistake in my first 2 weeks or so when I was learning this technique. I was actually doing the wrong technique. So I'd followed advice that I'd watched on many YouTube videos to say start slowly and then build the tempo up. But I'd started too slowly. So I was starting around 140 BPM. And it turns out I was probably doing what they call the flat foot technique. You can only take that to a certain tempo, so that would never have got to 180, 190, 200, which is what I was aiming for. So, and the other thing with the flat foot technique as well is that you tire a lot more quickly. So what you want to be going for with the ankle technique is a movement where you don't feel like you're tired at all. How I found my natural tempo was as a single bass drum player. I used to bounce my right foot on the pedal, and it turns out that was the ankle technique I was doing. So my kind of natural tempo for that is around probably about 190. Problem is my left foot, now I've started to get that one engaged, its natural tempo is probably around 175. So one's going faster than the other. So I had to find a tempo to bring them together to be able to do alternate that was comfortable-ish for both. So I had to train my right foot to be slower, and I had to train my left foot to be a little bit faster. So I settled on a tempo of around 182, and that's what I practice both my feet on. So I start with my left foot. That's got to catch up a little bit. Once that kind of locks into the tempo, 5 minutes passes, I then switch to my right foot. What normally happens with the right foot is it speeds off, it starts to go really fast, and I have to kind of like just let it lock in over time. So it normally takes the first minute or so before it's actually locked into tempo. But I'm hoping with continued practice, I can just start them and stop them when I need to at the tempo at which I want to start them, stop them at. How hard is it as a technique? It's pretty damn hard. So my single bass drum playing over 25 years, I've learned most of the standard techniques as a drummer, double strokes, finger technique for single strokes, and I would say out of all of them, the ankle technique is probably harder than all of them. Don't let that dissuade you, because it's a brilliant thing to work on, and it's actually something you can just work on a daily basis, like 15 minutes a day, like even just 15 minutes a day, 5 days a week, and you can just get yourself in a room, take your mind off it. As I said in the previous section, look on the internet, look on your phone while you're doing it, get those minutes practicing, and slowly but surely, day by day, you'll see small incremental improvements in it. So how long is it going to take? Well, to be honest, I'm not there yet, so I couldn't answer that. I would estimate maybe 6 months. When I say 6 months, what I expect then is to have my feet be able to do 16th notes, my left hand playing on the snare 2 and 4, and my right hand every quarter notes. At the moment, I'm just concentrating on the feet. It's such a strange technique, and you have to really just concentrate one thing at a time and build it up. With enough constant practice, you will get it, and it will come, but it just takes time. It takes more time than anything I've done before, but it does come. So if it feels like it's not working and it feels like it'll never work, don't be disheartened. Keep that practice up. It's only 15 minutes a day, 5 days a week. You'll get there, but you just got to keep diligent, keep that practice up. Honestly, you'll get there.